Okay, so this is David Cashman with SEB Housing. This is the lottery for the affordable units at the Buckley in Framingham. It looks like we have 11 or so households that are on the YouTube live stream. Would one of you, anyone, just type anything or type to let me know that you can hear me? I want to make sure everyone can hear me before we start. Great. Okay, so you can hear me. So again, David Cashman, SEB Housing. This is the lottery for the affordable units at the Buckley. We have 16 households attending by YouTube live stream and one household who is on the phone. Just to recap, the way that this is going to work, and hopefully some of this is familiar by now from having read the materials we sent you, but everyone is going to get picked in the lottery tonight, okay? So it doesn't work like many other lotteries that you think of where there are winners and losers. In this lottery, everyone gets picked and everyone gets a position on a waiting list or several waiting lists if you applied and were eligible for more than one unit size. When I do the lottery drawing in just a moment here, and the way that's going to work is there were 28 households total, and 19 of those households indicated that they qualified for local preference. So by program rules, we have to do two different drawings. One of the drawings is a local preference drawing. That will just be the 19 households who indicated and demonstrated that they qualified for local preference. I will put those 19 numbers. Here they are. This is my local preference list. These are just the application numbers of people who indicated they were local preference. They are already pre-shuffled, and I will shuffle them up more once I put them in my lottery box to do the drawing. When I draw them out, I will call them out one by one and put them on my list. Okay. After I do that drawing, I will add those 19 numbers to the other 9 households who were not local preference, but who are still part of this lottery. So then I will do a second drawing, which is our general drawing, and that's going to have all 28 households who are in this lottery. I will then proceed to pick out all 28 of those numbers, and I will put them on this list on this side. So this has 28 spaces. That's the general. And this over here has 19. So I will write those down as I am picking numbers out. At the end of this, if you weren't sure where your number was, you can ask, and I'd be happy to let you know. Now, it's very important to keep in mind, and hopefully this doesn't come as a surprise at this point, the order in which I'm drawing household numbers out tonight is not, I repeat, is not the waiting list that will determine the order that households get to move forward after this. There are priorities for local preference, for household size, for households who need disabled accessible units that have to be implemented. So what that means is that the order that I pick the numbers out of the box has some relevance, but it is not the ultimate determination of the waiting list order. I will sort the results after we do the drawing, and that will be offline. That will be, we will conclude this session, and then I will do that afterwards to create the waiting list. And everyone, I think, who's in this lottery has an email, so you can expect to get an email from me tonight, later on tonight, with the waiting list. And it'll show waiting lists by each unit size: studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, and you'll find your lottery application number on those waiting lists. Those waiting lists will determine or show the order that households will get to move forward in applying for leases. So let me just ask now, we have a bunch of households who are applying by live stream or attending by live stream, and one household who's on the conference call. For the household who's on the conference call, ma'am, do you know, and you don't have to tell me, I just want to make sure, do you know your lottery application number so you know what you're listening for?
Yes, I do.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And for the households who are attending by live stream, let me ask it this way. Is there anyone who does not know what their application number is? I'm just going to wait and see if anyone responds. Okay, so it looks like everyone knows their lottery application number, which is great. Again, if you don't, if you need me to tell you after we've done the drawing where you were picked, I'm happy to do that. But again, the biggest factor is going to be after I do the sorting and the actual waiting list that I create and which I send to you tonight. That will be the order that households get to move forward in applying for leases. As you probably know from our materials, the next step is to apply for a lease with the leasing office, okay? Just to be clear, SEB Housing is not the leasing office. We are a consultant who manages and runs the affordable lottery for them, but we will be turning over the waiting list to the leasing office tonight. I will be providing you with their contact information, and I will also be providing all of your contact information to them so that they can get in touch with you and you can get in touch with them if need be to figure out the next steps in applying for a lease. Now remember, if you've gotten this far, and that's great, that means that we, SEB Housing, have found you program eligible. In a nutshell, that means essentially that you are not over the income and asset limits and other requirements. We have not done any screening to determine if anyone in the lottery is lease eligible. That's a totally separate determination that factors in things like, which may factor in things like credit score and rental history and things like that. We didn't ask you any of those questions on the program application because that is not a screening that we're doing. So just keep that in mind, that program eligibility is a separate factor than lease eligibility. That will be the next step. If you're lease eligible, great. You can set you can pick a unit of your choosing and then figure out a move-in date and sign a lease with the leasing office. Are there any questions before we get started? Okay, I don't think there are any questions, so we will get started with the drawing, and if there are any questions after, please feel free to let me know. Okay, so this is going to be first. Again, this is the local preference drawing. This is just the 19 households that indicated they were local preference. I'm going to put, these are pre-shuffled by anonymous number. I'm going to put them in the lottery box. I will then shake it up. Sorry, I realize that's maybe a little dizzying for those of you watching, so I'll do that off to the side. Okay, and without further ado, first number is A015. Next, A011. A016. A022. A007. A013. A024, A025, A008, A027, A006, A021, A026, A018, A023, A012, A020, A002, and the last one from the local preference drawing is A019. A019. Okay, so that was the local preference drawing. Now I am going to add those households to the other 9 non-local households. And just give me a sec, I'm going to shuffle these up. Okay, now we're going to do the general drawing. This is now the general drawing for Framingham Buckley. The first number is A014. A028. A015. A007. A005. A023. A006. A019. A026. A008. A027. A010. A017. A018. A013. A022. A020. A024. A012. A025. A016. A011. A021. A004. A001. A003. A002. And the last number is A009. Okay, so that concludes both drawings. Did anyone have any questions? Anyone need me to repeat where they're...
I'd like to ask a question.
Okay, so there's a question from the household on the call. Go ahead.
I'd like to ask you, and perhaps you can or cannot answer it, but it doesn't hurt to ask.
Sure.
What percentage does the place in which you call the number have to do with if you're going to be called? In other words, some of it goes to the fact that you could be local preference, you could need a house, you could need special provisions if you have a disability, but also you mentioned that the number in place that you call it, that has some bearing. What would you say the percentage is, the bearing
Sure.
of be, oh, okay.
Yeah, so the question, in case people online couldn't hear, is basically how important is the order that I just called the numbers? And to answer that question, I don't know that I could have put a percentage on it, but the way that it's important is essentially it matters relative to households who are similarly situated. So what that means, just for example, if you are asking about how that would impact your position on the two-bedroom local preference list, well, type 3 and type 2 households have the same preference for a two-bedroom. Type 1 households have less preference because they don't need two rooms. So as between a type 3 and a type 2, then the household that gets picked first would be higher on that two-bedroom waiting list. Okay?
Oh, I see.
Now, if we're talking about the two-bedroom local preference waiting list, then as between type 3 and type 2, households who are local preference get priority. So if a type 2 household, or let's say it this way, if a type 3 household got picked who is not local preference, got picked before a type 3 or 2 household who was local preference, those local preference households, even though they got drawn after, would leapfrog them for a local preference two-bedroom unit. Okay? But there are also two-bedroom units that are not local preference on these waiting lists. So for that separate waiting list where there is no preference, and I see the questions coming in online, just a sec, then there would not be a leapfrogging on the non-local preference two-bedroom list. Does that make sense?
100%, yes. Thank you very much.
You got it. Okay, so just going to the questions coming in, A023 was picked number 15 on the local drawing and was picked number 6 on the general drawing. The next question from Diana and Brianna is the winning numbers. So again, there's no winning numbers, okay? There are no winning or losing numbers. Every single person in this lottery gets a position on the waiting list, and there are going to be 7 waiting lists. Those waiting lists determine the order that you get to move forward in applying for a lease. So getting picked earlier is better in the lottery drawing, but again, some households will ultimately leapfrog other households if they have higher priority for the units. I will email everyone tonight with the waiting list. You just need to know your lottery number, which I think everyone does. You'll find your lottery number on those waiting lists, and those are in order from top to bottom of priority that you'll get to move forward in applying for a lease. And by the way, on that, like I said at the beginning, I'm going to give you the leasing office's contact number. I know that they're looking to get started soon, and I know that they're pretty diligent. So if you have a lower number, please be patient, not calling them repeatedly, because chances are they just haven't gotten to your number yet. But if and when they do, they will reach out to you. Okay, so here's another question from Lori. I'm in a 1-bed and in need of a 2-bedroom. Okay, so Lori, at this point, we can't, if you applied for a 2-bedroom and were eligible, then you'll be somewhere on the 2-bedroom waiting list. If you also applied for a 1-bedroom, you'll be also on a 1-bedroom waiting list somewhere. If you did not apply, Lori, for a 2-bed, then we can't put you on the 2-bedroom waiting list at this point. Okay, so you did. So then you'll be on a 2-bedroom waiting list somewhere. I don't know where yet. I have to do the lottery sort after we finish this. But you'll find your number on the 2-bedroom list once I do the sort. Does that make sense? Ms. Ramos, I think your question You just wrote, I'm A15. I think you're asking where you were called. You were called number 1 on the local preference list and number 3 on the general list. So again, just keep in mind, if you applied for more than one unit type, say you applied for 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms maybe even, and you qualified for all of them, you may have a position higher on one of those lists than you do. You probably will. You'll have a higher position on one of those lists than you do on some of the other lists, most likely. So the question from Lori is, I applied for a 3-bedroom. Okay, so I'm not. Lori, I'm not sure, if your question is you're trying to switch lists, you can't switch lists at this point. If you applied for a 3-bedroom, then you'll be on the 3-bedroom list. And if you applied for a 2-bedroom, you'll be on the 2-bedroom list as well. Anyone who is going to be living in the unit with you should have been on your application. If they weren't on your application, there may be a process to add them later, but generally whoever is going to be moving into the unit has to have been on the application with you. Question from Shelley, A021, where am I? A021, Shelley, you were called number 12 on the local preference list, and you were called number 23 on the general list. Again, it matters to some extent, but the order that you were called, this is not the waiting list. I still need to create that this evening, and I will send you that once I have done it. A025, Ms. Rodriguez, you were called number 8 on the local preference list and number 20 on the general list. Did you call Ms. DeJesus? Did you call A028? That number was called number 2nd on the general list, and I don't believe you were on the local list, so you weren't called there. Question from Ms. Park, I think. A006, where am I? You were called number 11 on the local list and number 7 on the general list. Rasak, A009. Rasak, you were called 28th on the general list.
Now, can I ask a question again?
Yes.
On the telephone?
Yep. So hold on. I see Gary's got a question on. So just hold on one sec, Gary. I'm going to take this call and then I'll get back to you. Go ahead, ma'am.
I was just wondering, all the 1-bedroom apartments, are those allocated to the locals, or do you have any for the general?
Okay, so the 1-bedrooms were 7 local preference units. There was 1 bedroom that was built out for persons with handicap, but there were no applicants who indicated they needed a 1-bedroom handicap unit. Therefore, the 1 handicap unit will be made available with equal priority as between local and non-local households. In case it's not clear, and maybe this is a good time to add this, there are local and non-local lists. However, confusingly, both people who are local and non-local will be on both of those lists. So again, to repeat, there are local and non-local waiting lists. People who are both local and non-local confusingly, will be on both of those lists. And that's somewhat of a relic of an earlier time, the way they made us set up these lotteries, but that is how it works. Just to give you an example, on a 2-bedroom local preference waiting list, a type 2 household who's not local preference would get priority over a type 1 household who is local preference for a 2-bedroom local preference unit. So households.
Well, you can say that again. It's mighty confusing, but that's okay. Once you send me an email tonight, I'll be more. I'll know what's going on a little better.
Right. So let me get back to Gary here. I think that's where I left off. So I think I may have just answered your question, Gary. Yep. You know, if you have a larger, it's not necessarily just composition, it's household type. And larger household types will get priority for larger units. So for a studio or a 1-bedroom, everyone has the same priority. For a 2-bedroom, type 2 and type 3 households get priority over type 1 households. For a 3-bedroom, type 3 households get priority over type 2 households, and type 2 households get priority over type 1 households. This is all in the information packet, and you can find the waiting list in there if you're kind of curious just to review those. But again, I will sort it all onto the waiting list and send you that tonight, and that will determine the order that households will get to move forward. Lori, A010, what number was I on the general list? Lori, you were number 12. Gary, A008, you were number 9 on the local and number 10 on the general. Cynthia, A012, number 16 on the local, number 19 on the general. Karina, there is 4 in my family. What are my chances for a 3-bedroom? Well, if there's 4 people in your household, you're a type 3 household. There were 8 type 3 households who applied for a 3-bedroom unit. So, Karina, your chances of getting a 3-bedroom will depend on where you were drawn relative to the other 7 type 3 households. And again, I don't know that. I have to sort it after this is done. But your chances depend on where you were drawn relative to other type 3 households in the lottery. Gary, is there only one 3-bedroom available? Correct. And the 3-bedroom has some features. It's built out for persons with mobility impairments. So I assume that means it may have some lower countertops. It may have grab bars in the shower and some other minor adjustments to make it more accessible. But there were no households that indicated they needed a disabled 3-bedroom unit in the lottery, and therefore all lottery households who applied for a 3-bedroom will have the opportunity, sort of in order, only one household will get it, but it will be made available to them.
Now, does that go for the 1-bedroom as well? There's 7 for locals and the 1 disabled unit. They already made the counters low and so on and so forth in that unit.
In the 1-bedroom disabled unit?
Yes.
I would assume so. Again, I'm not on site, but that's typically, when they're designating a unit as disabled accessible, I think typically lower countertops is something that they would have. Don't quote me on it. Maybe there's some other way they've made it accessible. I don't know exactly because I haven't seen it, but that's just sort of a general guess based on what I usually see.
Thank you.
You got it. Rasak, question, how many do we have for type 1? There were 5 applicants who applied. Oh, no, you're saying type 1. Hold on one second. I assume you're asking me that question, so I'll just tell you right now, there are 12 Type 1 households in the lottery. We're stocked 12 Type 1 households in the lottery. Angelica, how many people applied for a 2-bedroom? 15 people applied for a 2-bedroom unit, Angelica. 15, and there are 10 units. 6 are local preference. 4 are general, so no local preference. 6 local preference, 4 general. Now those 4 units have features built out for persons with disabilities. There was one applicant who indicated they needed those features, so that person will have first priority for one of those 2-bedroom disabled units, but the other 3 will be made available to all households on an equal basis without regard to local preference, and that will just depend on when they were drawn and their household type.
How do we know our household type? When we got our number, does our household type appear on there?
Yeah, the question is, how do you know what type you are? It would have been on your lottery application number, and it was something you would have filled out in your application. Yep. Alicia, how many 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms are available? There are 8 1-bedrooms and 10 2-bedrooms. Any questions from people who are on the live stream on YouTube that I haven't answered? If I missed something, please let me know. I think I got them all, but if I missed something, absolutely speak up. I'm happy to answer it before we finish up here. Ms. Ramos, so the disabled accessible unit is for folks with physical disabilities. So if you had indicated that you had a physical disability and needed a unit that addressed physical disabilities, then you would get priority for those. There aren't any priorities for a learning disability, unfortunately. Just joining now, Ashley, A024, you were called number 7 in the local preference and number 18 in the general. Ashley, there's 1 3-bedroom in this lottery. Karina, I guess maybe you're asking me if there's a family of 5. I don't know. I just know the types. Really, it doesn't matter if it's a family of 4, 5, or 6. The only thing that matters is the household types. So again, I think the info that would probably be most pertinent to you, I think, unless I'm missing something, is that there were 8 Type 3 households. But again, whether those households had 4 people, 5 people, 6 people, or 3 people with a couple who can't be required to share a bedroom and a child, doesn't really matter. It's just the household type. Any other questions? Where is A015? A015 was drawn first in the local preference and 3rd in the general. Any other questions?
Well, this question might not be pertinent. However, again, I'd like to ask it. My local housing authority has the rent amount that can be paid at over like $200 more than they're asking at the Buckley.
Mm-hmm.
Now, could I move into a 2-bedroom with one person?
Did you apply for a 2-bedroom?
Yes.
And your housing authority will pay $200 more than at Buckley?
Yes.
Then I would think you should be fine.
For a 1-bedroom. Yeah.
For a 1-bedroom. Well, that's something you'll have to work out with them. That's not really an SEB or a program sort of issue. That's more of an issue with your housing authority. And I guess for anyone else who's watching, if anyone has a...
They told me that I could move into a unit that would, be the same price or lower than what they are offering.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, typically if you're...
Is within the limits.
If it's within the limits, then I would assume it's fine. I don't want to speak for the housing authority, but if the rent for a 2-bedroom is within what your housing authority is willing to pay, I would assume that you would be okay to move forward. Lori, A010, what number was I on the general list? You were drawn 12th, Lori. Karina on the application said larger. Yeah, so larger families generally do have priority, but again, that's a bit of an overgeneralization. You have to look at the household type. Type typically corresponds to the size, but not perfectly in every instance. So just by way of a quick example, a father and child would be a type 2 household because the program assumes they shouldn't be required to share 1 bedroom. They should have 2 separate rooms. But another 2-person household, like a married couple, the program assumes only needs 1 bedroom. They can share it. So those are both 2-person households, but different types. One of them is a type 1 and one of them is a type 2. All right. Any other questions? Any other questions? Again, I have all your emails. I will sort the results this evening, and I will get you the waiting list as soon as I have done that. That will come from the info@SEB Housing account. The PDF with your lottery application number in there, and that's going to let you know when you can expect, where you are on the list and moving forward. So, all right, I don't think there are any other questions, I think. And
thank you so much.
You got it. Thanks for attending, everyone, and good luck moving forward, and have a great evening. Goodbye.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.